Welcome to the podcast that brings you interviews, reviews, arts and entertainment news, all wrapped up in one place. You're listening to Art with Amanny Mo. Coming up in this episode, we're rolling out the red carpet for Edinburgh Fringe Festival. The stage is set as arts and culture takes over the Scottish city of Edinburgh. Every nook and cranny, well, almost, is taken over by artists and performers from all over the world, from now right up until the 26th of August. Comedy is huge at Ed Fringe, so here on Art to Art with me, Amanny Mo, I've brought together some absolutely cracking comedians who will, well, bring the laughs and share their stories. My guests include Amy Mason, a recent favourite of BBC Radio 1 DJ Greg James.
Yeah, he played a couple of clips and then another day he played again a different video. So yeah, and he said he was obsessed with me, which is unbelievable. And an American actor, a stand-up comedian who's also in a number of ensemble troupes, GRACE.
You know how your friends sometimes are like, oh, I missed it. Oh, well. And you're like, yeah, you weren't going to come see it anyway. You just, now I'm having them put their money where their mouth is.
This is just one of 2 podcast episodes focused on Ed Fringe comedians. Oh, and don't worry, we've got you covered. We'll be popping all of our guests' details in the podcast episode description, and you can find them whenever you want to. So, lights, camera, comedy. My first guest is not only a comedian but a writer and an actor who's had TV roles in Atypical, Mr. Mayor and the hilarious Superstore.
So everyone knows now?
Everyone knows.
Do you want to get married?
Okay.
GRACE is a man with many talents, and he's not only a member of improv troupe Baby Wants Candy at this year's Ed Fringe, but he's also in musical ensemble cast Shamilton. Plus, he's bringing back his GRACE as Scarlett Johannsen for a limited time only.
Oh yeah, you missed it? Well, it's coming back for 5 nights.
And there's no freebies here. Get your ticket.
No comps.
No. And he's buzzing about his debut solo show Sardines, a comedy about death. So without further ado, please welcome to the podcast stage, GRACE. You're listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo, and I'd love to have an Art to Art with you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Art to Art podcast. The thing is, I'm such a huge fan of one of the things you're in, Superstore. Well, we're going to get on to a little bit of Superstore and some other bits, but of course we're here to talk about Ed Fringe. I want to just double back, Chris, if I may. Can we talk about how did you get into acting and comedy, and what were you doing before you got your big break?
Ooh, have I gotten my big break?
I think so.
I think before I got my big break, I was on the Art to Art podcast. And then I have been acting ever since I was a little kid, the way everybody does in school dramas and stuff like that. And I took some improv classes when I was in junior high, and I just kind of never quit. Like, my main advice to people when they ask about like getting into show business or whatever is just to not quit. So I haven't really been doing much before I did all this, like I'd just been plugging away at it for a whole bunch of years. I was doing comedy and acting in New York for like 20 years. And then I came out to Los Angeles. And so it hasn't been like, I guess when I say like, have I had a big break? From my perspective, it doesn't feel like there was a hockey stick style bump up. It was more like a very incremental, slowly adding little bits of success here and there.
Yeah.
But I mostly just at critical points in my life, like when I was finishing high school, leaving college, multiple points in my life, there were specific people that said that I couldn't do it. And I'm very ornery in the sense that I'm like, all right, well, just to prove you wrong, I'm going to go do this thing. And so I've had a long history of resisting other people's opinions about me.
It's okay to get people's opinions on things, but don't let their opinions sway you from what you want to do, because I think it's easily done, especially because I think that acting and even comedy to an extent, especially stand-up, you're really putting yourself out there and you really are making yourself a bit of a target, especially in stand-up, but also with acting quite vulnerable in a way, you know, because you're there doing your thing and it's very easy to get knocked down and you get knockbacks. And as you say, like, maybe it doesn't have to be a big break. It can just be all those incremental things that make you go, yes, like those are the wins that you're like, yeah.
Yeah, I heard Conan O'Brien describe a comedian's career once as not a big break, but thinking of it as a mosaic. And you're putting little pieces here and here, like you're working on this project, or you go do a friend's short film, and gradually you're building up a picture of a larger career around it.
Yeah, that makes absolute perfect sense. We know you probably more in the UK from the small screen, Atypical, and also Superstore, one of my favourites.
I was in Top Gun Maverick. I don't know if people know that, but then they did a lot of CGI, and so maybe you don't recognize.
I mean, come on. Get that on IMDb.
These movies need more diversity. Let me be one of the fighter jets.
I love it. I don't know about you, and this is just a real personal bugbear of mine, Chris. Bear with me for 1 second, right? So I don't know if it's like the same in the US, maybe less so, but in the UK, there's a lot of push on diversity and inclusion and equality and la la la. But actually, I've been in this industry quite a long time and I haven't really seen things change drastically. There are a few little tweaks here and there because I think that the same people at the top making the decisions haven't really changed. It's still a bit of an old, especially here in the UK, it's still a bit of an old boys network, you know? It's good to have diversity and I appreciate it. I'm sure people really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the struggle that we would have is that if we're born into systems where we are not the default, then you're always going to be struggling within someone else's system. And so we can fight as much as we can from the bottom. And even with their good intentions, they can try to increase diversity as much as possible. But in our own lifetime, we're probably always going to be swimming upstream. I hate to tell you this.
I think you're right, though, Chris, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people that are BIPOC will feel sort of intuitively that they sort of are always going to be against those trends. And then, you know, that's just sort of the challenge we have to accept. For someone like me going into the arts, then that's unfortunately part of the deal. You know, one thing I realized recently was, you know, because I've sometimes thought like, well, if I was born in China, then I would speak Chinese and I would definitely be the default in terms of being an artist or an actor.
Yeah.
But then I realized, well, my parents met in the US. So there is no version of me that grew up in China. You know, like they weren't like married there and then came here. Like I wouldn't exist unless they both came to America. So sort of poignantly, it means that I can only be born into a system where I don't quite belong, you know?
I'm feeling that. I mean, I was born here in the UK. My parents are Arabic, but Yemen, where my parents are from, part of it was a British colony at the time. So it is difficult, isn't it? Because you wouldn't be the person that I definitely think as a woman, I would possibly not be the person that I am.
Yeah.
I think it is getting better. But yeah, I mean, I have to say thank you as well for Superstore, because as I say, it got me through lockdown. It was a discovery in lockdown, a bit like Schitt's Creek, which I tried to watch twice and I never got into it. And then I watched Schitt's Creek and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Superstore is just one of the best. Was that all improvised? Any of it improvised? Or was it all scripted? I'm just dying to ask you that one question.
I would say it's all scripted with improv sprinkled in. So there are, I think it's a relatively standard procedure, which is they have a very, very polished, refined script by the amazing writers. They get the takes that they need to make sure that the story can be told. And then almost always there'd be at the end like if you have an idea and you want to try something, we were free to try them. Or they would say like, okay, now just do whatever you want for a couple of takes. So I would say the spine of the storylines is all written. And I would say 90% of the script, maybe even 95 is written. But then there are moments that are tossed in that are improvised as well.
Some really funny moments. Of course, you know, you are funny. And Ed Fringe. Ed Fringe, well, you debuted last year, didn't you, with your show? What was that experience like?
Last year's experience doing GRACE as Scarlett Johannsen far surpassed what I expected it would be, to the point that I'm kind of nervous about doing it this year. When I speak to British people, I say I feel like they can relate to this sense of the difficult second album. I don't know why. Like, when I have spoken to my friends in England and Scotland, and they seem to deeply relate to like the potential of not meeting my expectations. If this was an American podcast, I would have to be like, you know what? It's so amazing. Like, this year's show is going to build on last year's show. You know, like, it's a different energy. But I feel like whenever I talk to British people, they're fine with me being dour.
Totally. Just say it like it is. We love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. It's the second album syndrome. But, you know, it's all a wonderful challenge, isn't it? And not only are you coming here with Sardines, a comedy about death, which I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about, but you're actually going to be in 3 shows at Edinburgh. That's awesome.
Well, I was in some improv shows last year, and like I've come to a lot of Edinburgh Fringes through doing Baby Wants Candy. And when I first got to, like, this is 2012 or 13 when I first went to Scotland, I remember that Phil Jupitus used to be in like 7 shows a day. I would like be like, everywhere I turn around, he was like reading a poem or he was doing a thing. And I was like, oh, I would love to sort of be that busy. So yeah, this year I'm actually doing, there's 5 days where I'm doing 4 shows, because I'm doing at 1:40 p.m. I'm doing Sardines. 6:20 maybe is Shamilton, which is a Baby Wants Candy version of Hamilton. 8 is Baby Wants Candy, and then August 8th through 12th, I'm bringing back Scarlett Johannsen for 5 nights. So on those days, I'll have 4 shows.
Amazing. Oh, so that's a real treat.
I have a handful of people from last year that said, oh, I missed it. And you know how your friends sometimes are like, oh, I missed it. Oh, well. And you're like, yeah, you weren't going to come see it anyway. You just, you know, now I'm having them put their money where their mouth is. It's like, oh, yeah, you missed it. Well, it's coming back for 5 nights.
And there's no freebies here. Get your ticket.
No comps.
No comps. You're listening to Art to Art with me, your host, Amanny Mo. You can catch up with all episodes on our website, Art to Art, that's art2art.uk. That was just part 1 of my conversation with the wonderfully charming comedian GRACE, whose solo show Sardines is at Ed Fringe until the 26th of August, with a very limited run of GRACE as Scarlett Johannsen, which sold out at last year's Fringe Festival, and the Guardian newspaper gave it a 4-star review last year. Sounds like a show not to be missed. I'll be bringing you part 2 of my chat with Chris in a bit, but in the meantime, if you want to check him out, you can head on over to chrisgrace.com. Art to Art with Amanny Mo is free to listen to and download on all major platforms now. Some episodes are on YouTube, or you can head on over to our website, Art2Art, that's art2art.uk. Don't forget, you can find out more about today's guests by heading to this podcast episode's description. Still to come, I'll be chatting with the uber-talented Amy Mason.
Now I've reached this point, I realise that if you do keep going and plugging away, and if you do like what you're doing and you're pleased with it and proud of it, things do happen, and often things that you can't predict.
We'll also hear part 2 of my conversation with American comedian and Superstore actor GRACE, who's not only performing his debut solo show Sardines at Ed Fringe, but another 3 shows. It's time now, though, to get back to the interviews, and my next guest is the supremely talented comedian Amy Mason. She's a writer, theatre maker, and also has written for TV panel shows like Dave's Hypothetical and BBC Radio 4's The News Quiz. Amy was also shortlisted for BBC New Act of the Year and is debuting her solo hour of stand-up, Freemason, at this year's Edinburgh Fringe. But very recently, Amy, who's an avid TikToker, found herself on BBC Radio 1 as Greg James played her Reasons Why I'm Late skit. Oh, the irony of that.
I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry. I had a tech meeting for my show that I totally forgot about.
No worries. Hang on, is this actually part of your MO? I'm not Greg James, you know. Listen, it's fine. I'm always a little bit late as well, and I'm never funny with it. So there we go. Lovely to meet you. You're killing it right now, Amy.
You.
I'm going to start with Ed Fringe, and then I want to work backwards a little bit and talk about how you got into comedy and all of that good stuff. But obviously, Freemason, this is your solo show at Edinburgh. Tell us a little bit about the show. Are you excited? You just mentioned there you're doing techie bits for it.
Yeah. So I'm really excited now. I think I've had times where I've thought this is a total disaster and this show is terrible. But now I think everyone goes through that. You're very hopeful. You think it's great. And then it doesn't live up to some point in rehearsals, you're like, this is just not what I thought it was going to be. But now I'm back on track. I'm really pleased with that. I'm really, really pleased with that. I think it's great. I'm really happy. Very, very excited to share it with people. I've been working with a director called Izzy Raby, and sort of getting on its feet and trying stuff out. And we've laughed so much in rehearsals. So yeah, I'm very hopeful about it. And yeah, I'm nervous about performing every day for a month. But I'm really excited to see audiences and meet people. So yeah.
I guess that's part and parcel of it, because Ed Fringe it's like a pressure pot in a way, and also a melting pot, because you've got everything from improv shows like Shamilton and things like that, to debut artists, to people like yourself who are established. Is this your first Ed Fringe show?
Yeah, so it's my first comedy hour. So I did like a theatre show there, like 11 years ago, a really long time ago. And yeah, I found it tough. I was very unprepared. I think now I know more about what to expect, and I know to pace myself and to look after my mental health, try to do some exercise and take it slow, really. I think it's very easy to get caught up and think that you need to go out every night and meet people and, schmooze. But I don't think I'm going to be doing very much of that at all, to be honest.
And that's what I meant by that pressure pot, because everyone's doing something. It's like I, have gone to a lot of film festivals as a film critic and reporter, and in those 10 days or whatever it is, everyone's pressurized. And sometimes you're you just want to enjoy it. You've obviously been there before, but what is your top tip for kind of keeping, as you mentioned, your mental health all balanced and savvy, or what just works for you, really?
I think I stopped drinking 10 months ago completely, and I think I'm hopeful that I will have an easier time, because I think it's so easy for paranoia or self-doubt to creep in. And I think people say call it hangxiety, don't they, when they've got a hangover. And I think alcohol can be a tough one if I think it's so much pressure. A lot of people, you could drink every day if you wanted to. I think for me, not drinking, I hate this, sounds so boring, for me to say this, but I think...
not at all.
I'm hopeful that it will be better not having hangovers and having a show to do and worrying about reviews, or, so yeah.
But also, it's a whole month of it, really. I mean, almost. So, like you say, you've got to pace yourself. If you peak too soon, you'll probably just be frazzled by the end of it. And you want to enjoy that experience as well, because every time you do a show, it's a different audience. Maybe people will come and see you again, but essentially you're playing it for a new crowd every night. That's how you've got to see it. Tell us about Freemason, the show. How did you come up with the name? And I've seen that it's a bit confessional. I read it on your Instagram, so I was like, what's Amy up to?
It's a bit confessional. So Freemason, obviously my name's Amy Mason. And so I love a pun. And it's really about my separation from my ex-husband, sort of me coming out as queer, splitting up with him, and really about kind of rediscovering my place in the world. It's a lot about parenting and my kids. So it's very much like an intro to me, I guess, and my current life. But it's got loads of jokes. So it's definitely not a downer, but it does have, yeah, confessional elements.
I like the sound of that. I did have a bit of a nosy. I loved going to nosy on people's Instagram, social media. And I noticed you've got a lovely little cat as well. I liked all the voices that you were doing.
Yeah, I've got two cats, one extremely fluffy and stupid, and one, the one you saw on Instagram, he's a bit slightly evil.
The only reason why I mentioned the cat is I'm obsessed with animals anyway, but I've got a rescue cat, Teddy, who's currently sleeping, and he's so different, you know, because he was Australian, and that he gets very stressed when he meets new people, and it's kind of dealing with all of that. I mean, honestly, it's like I don't know what I signed up for here. It's a good bloody job that I love him so bloody much, and he's too cute for words. Anyway, so I love those videos. They are so funny, especially the voices are brilliant, and your kids clearly love it as well. Speaking of obsessions, Greg James from Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, apparently obsessed with you. You've had a couple of your clips, haven't you, about being late? One of them wasn't it?
Yeah, so he's played. Yeah, I was completely out of the blue. Somebody messaged me and was like, "You're on Radio 1," and I was like, "What?" And then I switched it on and listened, and I couldn't believe it. He followed me on TikTok, and then he played a couple of clips, and then another day he played again a different video, clips from different videos. So yeah, and he said he was obsessed with me, which is unbelievable. So yeah, that's a completely out of the blue, very exciting.
That is amazing. Look, we could take those things for granted, but just share, what does it mean to you as a comedian? As I say, you know, you're not brand new on the comedy circuit, and actually many people spend many years up and down the country before they get legs, as it were. So, I mean, what does it mean when somebody like that picks up on your stuff? Does it kind of validate what you're doing?
Absolutely. It's very odd. It's like you can be very jealous when you start out, or, you know, when you've been going for a little while, and you can think that other people have got things you want and why have they got it. And you just have to keep going and plugging away. And sort of now I've reached this point, I realize that if you do keep going and plugging away, and if you do like what you're doing and you're pleased with it and proud of it, things do happen, you know, and often things that you can't predict. And it sounds so, but it's really about doing the work and making work that you're proud of and concentrating on that, really.
Yeah.
And the rest of the stuff will come. I mean, that's what I'm still hoping.
Let's talk after Edinburgh, yeah? No, I'm joking. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, because it's very easy. You're putting yourself out there. There's always somebody that just wants to knock you a little bit. And it's just bloody annoying, isn't it? When everyone's going, yeah, Amy, you're funny, you're brilliant, you're there. And then it just takes one idiot who's hiding behind. I mean, I, as a BBC presenter, and I used to have a weekly show, and, you know, you'll get 100 amazing messages, and then you'll get one plonker just saying, well, I don't really like you, or you've got an annoying voice, and you just think, oh, bloody, that's just rude. Why would you take the time to do that?
I know, people are so weird. Yeah,
people are weird. Anyway, let's just talk about how you got into comedy in the first place, because there's a bit where you talk about coming to comedy late. Did anyone push you into it? Or not push you physically, but just like sort of cajole you into it?
I sort of thought about it as like a pipe dream, but I never thought I'd be brave enough. I remember my grandma saying to me that she thought I'd be a good stand-up comedian, and I really trusted my grandma. I love my grandma. So yeah, so I had that in the back of my mind, and it's something I always wanted to try. And yeah, it wasn't until my oldest daughter was about 1 that I went out and did my first open mic in London. The thing is, I'm 42, and there actually weren't that many women doing stand-up on TV when I was young. And, you know, there weren't on panel shows or anything like that. There were a few, but it just didn't really feel like a place that women would be necessarily welcomed. Yeah. And actually, I really can credit that kind of thing changing and more women being on TV doing comedy and and, you know, more visible. And, you know, even at my older age, I think that inspired me, actually. It shows how important that kind of thing is, doesn't it? So
honestly, I think it's such an underrated thing. And, you know, everyone's talking about diversity and inclusion and all of that. But personally, they haven't shifted dramatically, is what I'm trying to say. You know, I'm an Arab Muslim woman of colour, and I still feel like there's a battle. And I was talking to Grace, a comedian who's going up to Ed Fringe, and he's in 3 shows as well as his debut solo show. And he was just saying, you know, he goes, unfortunately, Amanny, you're still going to be swimming, you know, upstream, you know. And I was like, oh, don't say that. But kind of is true.
I know it is true. And I think often it's, you know, women can say, oh, things are better. We do have more women winning awards and stuff. But I definitely think that people of colour and women of colour, there has not been the same progress made. And I think white women can be very blind to that fact. Or they, you know, they think, oh, well, I'm okay now. I'm doing bad. And they don't see. And things like all white lineups and stuff like that I don't think they're challenged enough.
Yeah, I agree.
There definitely is a long way to go.
The thing is, as a woman and a woman of colour, and even just as a woman, you'll probably relate to this, but it's like almost when women make it, it's kind of like, oh, well, I've made it now and I don't want to make too much noise because I'm here and I don't want to alert anyone to the fact that I've made it, because if I say something, I'll be accused of being this or that or the other and pushed back down the ladder. It's such a weird thing. It's
like when, you know, when you're little and you are going to bed late, but your parents haven't noticed and you're sitting in the living room with them and you're like, if I'm really quiet, they won't notice.
It's exactly that. They haven't checked the time. Yeah, it's kind of that. But, you know, anyway, I digress. But I like to share my kind of gripes with people that feel it, Amy. And I feel that you're feeling me right now. Who makes you laugh on the circuit? Is there anyone that you've got your eye on?
My friend Harriet Dyer is a comedian, quite an experienced comedian, and she's just got this real cult following, which she totally deserves. As a comedian and as a person, is just so funny. I just massively recommend her. My friend Katie Norris is doing a debut this year, and she's part of a sketch group that's been going for a long time called Norris and Parker. But she is hilarious. I think she's a musical comedian. I think her debut is going to do really well. Those 2 consistently are my actual friends. They make me laugh on a, you know, all the time, daily basis. And yeah, they're great comedians.
Thank you for those top tips. And then also, of course, you know, you've got quite a diverse sort of career, as it were, and you've written for TV shows, comedy panel shows and stuff, but also you were shortlisted, I should say, for BBC New Act as well back in 2022. Is it important to be diverse as a comedian? Is it important to do other work rather than just be known as a stand-up comedian, Amy?
I don't think it is necessarily. I think I've probably done things in a more difficult way. I think if I was a stand-up first, I think some of the other stuff would have followed. I think people have found it difficult to know where to place me. But for me, it's all just writing and performing. And so for me, it all feels quite similar. I mean, I wrote a novel first, like that was the first thing I did. And then I made some theatre and stuff like that. But I think for me, primarily now, I'm thinking of myself as a comedian who also writes.
Yeah. What projects have you got coming up that you're allowed to talk about? Obviously, we've got Ed Fringe and Freemason, but is there anything else coming up that we might see perhaps on the small or big screen?
Wow, I'm in a film. I've got just a very small part in a film. I don't think I can say what that is yet, but then I've got
exciting.
I'm writing a pilot. I'm going to write a pilot, which is like a vehicle for me. But that's, you know, way off coming out. But I mean, hopefully I'm going to be doing a tour early next year of my show.
Amazing.
So yeah, bits and pieces.
Sounds absolutely brilliant. Well, you're going to be busy with Ed Fringe as well.
I am. Sorry,
that's the big one. Get out of the way and then you'll be done. You'll be like, woo, on cloud 9. Finally, on Art to Art, my podcast, we talk about the watch list. Now, as it's an arts and entertainment entertainment podcast, you know, people have always got that list of, oh, I've got to see this, I've got to see that, or listen to that podcast. And it's very funny because when I ask people this question, some people literally have a list that they pull out. I'm absolutely positive, Amy, that you're going to give us some really interesting choices. So is there anything on your watch list at the moment that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, well, I want to read the new Miranda July book. Can't remember what it's called, but I've heard fantastic things about that.
That's a good shout.
Cool. And there's a book called The Coin, which I've heard is brilliant. I've just pre-ordered it. That's about a Palestinian woman in America who gets into dealing luxury handbags. Sounds very intriguing. Ooh. And I've heard brilliant things about that. Again, I will give you one author and one title, and not the title for one and not the author of the other. But anyway, you can find them. And yeah, those are sort of my main things.
I'll put them in the description.
I'm reading a lot at the moment, actually. Been watching less. I've got a hammock in the garden now, so I do a lot of lying in the hammock and reading.
Oh my gosh. Hammocks are the best thing ever. My brother's got 3 in the garden. They've got a massive garden. Isn't it like bliss? It's pure bliss. Well, when you've got the weather, but so my parents are from Yemen, so I'm Yemeni. But when I went to Yemen as a child, I remember, so what they do with the children, they have high beds, and they have these, they call it a handul, and it's like a mini hammock, and the baby crawls in, not a baby, but toddler, and then they swoosh it with their legs. And it literally is the best thing. I mean, I used to try and climb in. I was 10. That was just not a good idea. Yeah. But yeah, so that is just amazing. Anyway, I'm just sharing once again. I don't know what you're doing to me, Amy, but clearly.
No, I think that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? So it's the baby version of a hammock. But anyway, go and enjoy your hammock. And Freemason is coming to Ed Fringe. Amazing, Amy. It's an absolute joy and lots of giggles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was the brilliant Amy Mason there, sharing some fab stories with us. Her comedy show, Freemason, is on at the Fringe until the 26th of August. And you can find out more about Amy on her website, amy-mason.com. Art to Art with Amanny Mo is all about putting you at the heart of arts and entertainment through the conversations with the very people who are creating it. You can check out all available episodes now on arttoart.uk, or you can listen for free on all major platforms now. You're listening to Art to Art with Amanny Mo. Feel free to find me on socials at Amanny Mo, that's AMANNYMO, on Instagram or X. It's time to double back to our American friend, Grace. He's performing in not 1, but 4 shows at Ed Fringe this year, including his debut solo stand-up, Sardines, a comedy about death. Here's part 2 of our chat. Tell us a little bit about the solo show.
So Sardines is this show that I've been wanting to write for a while. And it's basically about my older sister, Jessie, my older brother, Victor, my partner, James, my mother, Grace, and my father, Paul, and how they all died in like a 5-year period. Like, we were a family that was like, we haven't even been to a funeral. Like, nothing has happened to our family. I guess everyone's going to live until we're 90 and, you know, we're all going to have long lives. And then the first thing that happens was my uncle John died, and then my sister Jessie died. And the next year, my brother Victor died, and then my partner died.
Gosh, I'm so sorry. That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's every one of them could have been a Fringe show. You know, if they had just spaced them out more, I could have done a Fringe show in between each one. But instead and now they're all in one. So
they couldn't even give you that, Chris.
No, they couldn't give you that. Then I wouldn't have a problem making a second and third show. And if you like that kind of humor, that's what the show's about. It's pretty dark.
You know, I always think that there's so much humor in darkness, not to take away, obviously, from your loss, because that is extremely sad, and I do think that grieving doesn't just happen. I think you're always grieving. I lost my best friend from childhood when I was only 17 years old, and she died in a horrible car accident. And the thing about that is you always carry that sort of sadness and light, because when you think of them, you're happy and you think of all the good things, but there's that sadness that, you know, we talked about getting old together and stuff like that. So I hear you. It's going to be an absolutely brilliant show. Yes, there will be those moments. And
I'm listed under the comedy section.
Okay.
And people have been laughing at the show here in the States. So, and I think actually, like, people, so I live in Los Angeles and I just did the Hollywood Fringe. And I think that Los Angeles people probably are more relating to the poignant moments of the show. But it just in my mind, having been to Edinburgh, this is my 11th Fringe that I'm coming to. I think there will be some fans of dark humor in the UK.
Oh, absolutely. I went to see Ed Byrne. I don't know if you know Ed Byrne, but I've interviewed him a few times, and his latest show is about his brother dying. And that's really, really poignant, and you can see him at points really holding on, but it's actually very funny as well, and the way he remembers him in some of the moments and stuff like that. So I'm sure the British humour, being the way it is, will appreciate you however you bring it. If not, go and see Shamilton or Baby Wants Candy. Tell us about those two shows, because they sound brilliant, and I love improv, and there's also a musical element to them as well.
Yeah, I mean, Baby Wants Candy is a long-running musical improv show where we improvise a narrative musical. I've been in it since 2012. But I think their first year there was like 2007 or something like that. And I would say that is the group sort of responsible for kickstarting musical improv, I want to say globally, to be honest, because it was definitely seminal for the States. There were shows at Edinburgh Fringe that when I was first there, I was like, oh, look at them. They're also doing musical improv. And so I think we're kind of proud to have helped build this whole genre at Edinburgh Fringe. And Shamilton is sort of a spin-off show of Baby Wants Candy, which some people prefer to Baby Wants Candy because it's a parody of Hamilton, where we improvise a show about a historical figure. So if you really, really like Hamilton, and if you really like improvised rap, you should come see that. We have a great cast for that, including, he goes by MC Hammersmith, improvised rapper, and he'll be in a lot of the Shamilton shows this year. And actually, by the way, we're doing a post-Fringe UK tour.
Oh, wow.
And I believe MC Hammersmith will be with us for almost all of that. And that's when I learned a whole bunch of names of cities that I have never heard of.
Well, there's a Hammersmith in London, West London.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Cities I've never heard of, such as Luton, Chelmsford, and Swindon.
Oh, interesting.
That is the response everybody has given me when I say that word.
Well, they may not be your Fringe audience, but they certainly will, mix it up a bit. It will be a very mixed audience for you, which is always good. What's the biggest challenge, would you say, doing stand-up for you?
I think my biggest challenge doing stand-up at this point is, how do I describe this? Like keeping the energy up for a sustained approach, because I think maybe other people are like me, like you enjoy the roller coaster of like little dopamine hits of, oh, this show went well, or this show went terribly. You even get sort of an adrenaline out of a show going badly. But then let's say you do shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when you need to be doing a more like, okay, let me listen to the video or watch the video that I shot at that set. Let me try to refine that thing that I riffed. Can I improve it so that it becomes a permanent part of the set? That is the biggest challenge for me. The thing of like, I actually have no problem. Like if you were to tell me to go to like the Bill Murray tonight and do a 10-minute set, I would love that, and I would feel confident, even if I didn't feel prepared, I would feel confident that I could do it. And then what would happen is, let's say today's Wednesday, I'd record the video. The hard part for me would be Thursday and Friday and Saturday. Can I watch the video and like really learn from it and improve myself? And in today's climate, also on that Thursday and Friday, can I watch the video, edit a clip of it, put it on TikTok? That's part of it now too. And that's just being a stand-up now. That's part of the business, is that in terms of marketing yourself. But it's that how do you keep plugging along on the days that you don't have the adrenaline?
Well, that's a really good point, actually.
The thing is, like, no one in the world, I mean, I'm sure you love doing this podcast, but you're probably not like every single, like we can't have just like excitement drive every step of our careers, and most other people are like, yeah, obviously that's what a job is. Like, I don't get super jazzed about every single moment of, being a document processor at an investment bank.
It's true. I mean, every job has its, let's say, the mundane bits or the bits that we don't particularly want to do. So we always put them off. And then, once we're done, then we're like, oh, yay. But yeah, that's just the way it goes, really. We do something on Art to Art called the watch list, where we ask you what is, like, when you go shopping and you've got a list of things to buy, or if you're doing your admin, you've got a list of things to do. Well, this is a list of things not only to watch, but it could be to listen to or read. So anything from the arts and entertainment world. So I'll let you kind of think about that for a moment if you've got one or two suggestions for us. But where are we going to see you next, Chris, apart from Ed Fringe? But are you doing any like TV films or any other things that we might see you in the small screen in the future?
You will definitely see me on your small screen. Maybe if you're watching it on your watch, it'll be even smaller. I finished shooting a show called The Residents. That is a Shonda Rhimes Netflix show.
Oh, wow.
I am not a big part in it, but I'm a small but interesting part on this show. But it's a murder mystery. I can't say too much about it, but it's a murder mystery set in the White House. And that will be, we just finished shooting like last month, so I actually don't know when it's coming out. But look for it. If I had to guess, I'd guess like November, December of this year. Something like that.
Oh, I love that. And yes, and tell us where we can find you on socials as well, please.
I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok, and it's at Chris Grace Comedy. Also on Blue Sky at Chris Grace. That's the Twitter alternative that I've decided to land on because I was on Threads, and Threads is getting a little toxic, so I just moved over to Blue Sky. Oh, I will say also, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Chris Grace Comedy, where I'm actually putting up like works in progress videos of the new show, and you can play board games with me as well. But it's mostly sort of a Patreon that I would have wanted, which is like, you can see I'm very in all candor talking about building this one-person show coming up.
Oh, that sounds really, really cool. So the watch list then, Chris, it's my final question to you because I've kept you a little bit longer. What would you have on your watch list that's like, oh, I really have been meaning to do this or read that or listen to this podcast or whatever it may be? Could even be a TV show or even a film that you're gagging to watch that you've missed out on. So just want to get into the mind of Chris Grace.
Let's see. I'm just going to look at my little...
Oh, you've got you literally have a list.
I have a Kindle full of a million books that I haven't read. And then I have movie cues and stuff like that. Trying to look
Very organized of you, I have to say.
There's a book here called Loch Ness Uncovered. I think I just downloaded that because it's about Loch Ness. I'm not putting that on my watch list. I have no idea what that's going to be about. I mean, what are they going to uncover anyway?
That they haven't uncovered, literally haven't uncovered all of these years. True.
Yeah. I will say one movie that is on my list to watch because a few of my friends told me how good it was is it's called Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World. It's I think a Romanian woman has directed I think it's a movie about making movies, so that's on my list. Also, weirdly, that's about as artsy a pick as I can think. And also on my list is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And then there's an album by a band called Nickel Creek that I've been wanting to listen to called Celebrants, like celebration but celebrants. Oh, I need to read the third book of The Three Body Problem. So I've read the first two. The second one was so good, and I just sort of had to like take a little break before I plowed on into the third book. I want to watch it when it goes to Netflix. Actually, I'd like to be in it because I think I could be like Benedict Wong's younger brother.
Well, we need to sort that out then, Chris.
Can we? Because
I'll get on the
I would say
phones.
Benedict Wong essentially has the career that I would like to have. So if at any point he wants to retire, I'm happy to take over.
You're going to step right in. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I knew you'd have some good picks. I honestly knew that. Can I say, have you seen Origin by Ava DuVernay?
No, I haven't. That is on my list for sure.
That has just flown under everybody's
one,
radar. It's
it's based
so
on
good.
Cast.
It's
Yes.
really, really, really powerful. I was blown away. And I was not expecting that. So I'm going to watch it again. I went to an intimate screening and Ava DuVernay flew in just for that screening.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty amazing. I didn't even know. It was a surprise to me as well. But wow, it's such a good film. But Chris, everyone should go check you out anyway. You are amazing. And I know that you're going to smash it at Edinburgh. You are funny. And it's good to know that there's a UK tour. I didn't know about that. So people can find you. I'm going to put it in the description anyway. So thank you so much for joining me on Art
everyone
Talk.
come see me in Chelmsford.
Or Swindon.
Yeah.
Or maybe Luton.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Isn't Chris Grace just absolutely brilliant? His solo comedy show, Sardines, is at Ed Fringe until the 26th of August. And you can find out more about his 3 other shows, Shamilton, Baby Wants Candy, and Chris Grace as Scarlett Johannsen by heading to his website, chrisgrace.com. Don't forget, you can find out more about today's guests by heading to this podcast episode's description. It's free to listen and download Art to Art with Amanny Mo on all major platforms now. Or you can head on over to our website, Art to Art, that's art2art.uk. It's time to wrap up proceedings, but I do really hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. Please do like, follow, and share the love with your friends. Well, that's it for another episode of Art to Art with me, Amanny Mo. This has been just one of 2 special Ed Fringe Comedians episodes, so do check out my socials at Amanny Mo, that's AMANNYMO, for more information. Next time, I'll be having an Art to Art with stand-up comedians Kate Lois Elliott and Harry Stacchini.
I'd been brought up thinking that my mum was brought up in a specific Christian church, and I mentioned it to a bunch of people in a pub when I was in my 20s, and they were all stunned because I had just told them that my mum was brought up in a very scary secretive cult, which had just been presented to me as normal my whole life. And then I went back to her and said, this was a cult, and she went, yeah, I guess it was. And then I got obsessed with cults for quite a long time. And that's where the show came from.
Towards the end of uni, I was like, right, I'm going to give 10 years to this because I'll be 30 by the time I'm there. And I'm like, and if I get to 30 and I'm making no money, I'll stop or I'll do something else, because my auntie was a comedian for a long time. She was in a double act. They were doing very, very well. You know, she's chummy with Sarah Millican. They came through with Mickey Flanagan, Michael McIntyre.
Oh, wow.
All these people. So they kind of give me an insight. So I had a bit of an idea of how comedy might work from the journey of it. But the difference with their time and my time is social media. So that 10-year stint for me, I just thought if I just keep doing this, it's like going to the gym. If you go 4 times a week, after 10 years, you're going to be in pretty decent nick.
Plus, there'll be a teaser from my very candid chat with the multi-award-winning political comedian Mark Thomas.
I'd always wanted to be a comic, but my dad was very insistent that I go to college. And I'm very glad he did. For me, it was the one place where you could express yourself, that comedy, literally, I lived in quite a heavy-handed household. And so it was the one place you could express yourself, was watching telly with the family, laughing. And so that it had currency, it had an emotional currency. I just loved performing, I just always did. When I was at college, me and my mates used to write shows and put them on in a Labour club in Wakefield, and we used to put them on it. We'd write it one day and perform it the next.
Time's up on this Ed Fringe Comedians special, but do look out for the second one coming soon. A massive thanks to my amazing guests Amy Mason and Chris Grace for having an Art to Art with me. Thanks to Luca Mo for the Art to Art titles and incidental music. And a big virtual hug to you for listening to my podcast. There are plenty more podcast episodes to catch up on from the world of arts and entertainment. You can listen or download for free via YouTube, our website, Art to Art, that's art2art.uk, or on all major platforms now. Until next time, see ya! You're listening to Art with Amanny Mo. This is your podcast that brings you interviews, reviews, arts and entertainment news, all wrapped up in one place.